Hello and welcome to episode 13 of Area Control Bros, an auspicious number for an auspicious set of games. Today we're going to talk about Raw and Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering, of course, is not an area control game, and neither is Raw, but we decided we wanted to talk about uh, some of the best that the board gaming hobby has to offer and some of the uh, not necessarily as good as Raw part of tabletop as a hobby. Um, and they're kind of polar opposites, I think. And so we thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about these two games because obviously Raw is extremely well known in the board game hobby, and obviously MTG is well known outside of the board gaming hobby and in general. And even though it's not, it's kind of outside of our wheelhouse to talk about dueling card games. My second favorite thing outside of area control is actually two-player dueling card games. We haven't really talked about it on the show, but I'm sure we've got BattleCon and Exceed and React and Sakura Arms reviews lined up for some indeterminate point in the future.
Yeah.
Other games we typically like are auction games, which Raw is. That's another genre we tend to gravitate toward.
Yes.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it on the Fractured Sky episode, brought up Raw, and Fractured Sky, of course, also has kind of these auction elements that we enjoyed. Anyway, guys want to just dive into Raw here?
Yeah, let's do it. Little Reiner Knizia game, right? Raw. I mean, I don't think I've played a single Reiner Knizia game that I don't like.
Reiner Knizia.
Hmm. I
Nice.
have a quick story about Raw. I find this quite funny, and I think Ben, you'll remember this. When I was first uh I kind of decided I was going to get into board games as a hobby. Um, and I didn't have really any board games. I had played some in college, and I knew that I liked it, but I didn't really have any board games. Like, I'm going to find out about all these different board games and buy a bunch of board games. And so Ben actually came up with me to buy some board games, and I was buying like a lot of them from this dude way up north. And Ben decided he was going to wait in the car, and I go in, and about 20 minutes later, I'm like coming outside to get Ben because this guy like wouldn't stop telling me about all of his favorite old games. And so we brought Ben up to this guy's game room. I don't remember his name is David or something like that. And the one game that he said you absolutely must get, and it's going to be hard to find, is Raw. And this was before the more recent Kickstarter.
The 20th
Uh,
century reprint.
exactly, yeah. Um, Before 25th Century reprinted this, and the guy mentioned like there's something
Yeah.
planned that might go on Kickstarter, so definitely get it then if you don't get it before. But it was this guy's favorite game, and so I had always kind of had Raw in my mind even when I started collecting these games. And I think it took about another year and a half or something like that before the Kickstarter happened, and then another long lot before it shipped.
Yeah.
But
It was some foreshadowing right at the beginning of your board game journey,
yeah.
you know?
And that guy knew what he was talking about too. Like it's such a good game. It's super, super fun. I really do think it's a timeless design. It's not something that is gonna, you know, I don't think you're gonna find a auction game that is like more elegant than this. You can add more, you can get more complicated. Um, but is it gonna be a better game? I'm not sure. I kind of, and just coming right out the gate, I kind of think it's like the auction game. It's really,
Oh,
really that
sure.
good.
This is the auction game. I don't think that's even controversial. And even compared to Reiner's other auction games, like I play Modern Art with family sometimes, and we played it ourselves a couple times. I think it's fine, but
Oh
Modern
yeah,
Art
I
is
was super, super hot on modern art actually before we got our hands on Raw, and I still really like modern art. Don't
yeah,
get me wrong; it's got its place.
there's nothing wrong with Modern Art, and the simplicity of it means it's easier to teach for people who are not board gamers.
Yeah.
Raw is definitely a little bit more of a hump. It's still a light game. It's in the light category for sure, but the symbology might be a little bit much if you're trying to teach your grandma at Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you do kind of have to be like, yeah, just bear with me for a moment.
Yeah,
This is what this means, and.
yeah, we want hats, we want floods. Yeah, these are monuments. There's the thing that you always have to be careful of when you're teaching like people that are like normies that aren't board gamers with this hobby is like what you can just see when their eyes glaze over as soon as you start explaining the rules. And so you have to like think, how do I avoid that?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I find symbology can be a catalyst for the eyes glazing over. And so there is a place for modern art, is what I'm saying. But if you can get over the hump, Raw is absolutely better, more exciting, and there's a lot to dig in there. And honestly, even though there is this element of randomness to Raw, it has this way of making each game kind of its own story and gives everything its own arc. And like we had so many floods this game, the Nile was flooding like crazy, or like there were no floods, or everybody had tons of monuments. It creates like I think it's an important part of the game, the bag aspect of it, where modern art doesn't really have that much random stuff going on. It's quite stable, in fact. Like the distribution of the artist cards will be slightly different depending on the game, but that's not really going to impact things drastically. And
Right.
so,
Whereas with Raw, like if only one flood comes out on round three and there's two people that have a bunch of rivers, I mean that's gonna be a damn auction, you know.
yeah,
Someone's gonna have to give
it'll
up
be
a high
contested.
pile. And
Yeah.
there might not even be anything else in the auction worth getting. And so yeah, I mean Raw does a really, really good job of like, okay, well, we're gonna take on a little bit of randomness, but it's all in an effort to have these really cool auctions where everything is valued very differently for different players, but not so much that like, you don't want to deny because it's not worth anything to you, you know?
Um, I do quite like the production of this printing of the game. I don't know what it looked like in previous editions, but the current print is pretty good. I think we kind of joked about how big the Raw statue is. It's like a doorstop.
Yeah,
Like
I got
the
I got it right here.
Oh, there it is.
yeah,
Like it's
Yeah.
like twice my nose, you know?
Yeah.
yeah, for those
Yeah.
listening at home, yeah.
I agree. I like it quite a bit. And I don't remember for 100% certainty, but I believe that older gentleman I was buying the games from that was telling me about Raw. He definitely had the older copy. I believe he had actually had to print out player boards that would like tell you the relative scoring values and like how they score of each of the different tiles. I don't think that you had player boards in the old version of the game. I could be totally wrong with that, but
It
no,
there
they've definitely done a pretty darn good job of it. And even the big like excessive raw piece is like it's fun, you pick it up, you
Yeah,
slam it
it's like
down.
it's like banging a gavel, it just gives you
Yes. It
power.
is totally like banging a gavel.
That's appropriate because in modern art, there was the little gavel.
Yeah, there's a literal gavel.
There's a
Yeah.
gavel in modern art. But anyway, yeah, the production of the 25th Century Games edition of the game is excellent. Not even necessarily just the deluxe version, just any version that they've done is you're going to be happy with it. Like I think the portability of the smaller box is nice, and then the chunkiness and the tactility of the deluxe edition with the wooden tiles and everything is also excellent. So you can't really go wrong with that version of the game. And I'm glad that it was reprinted because a lot of people have been exposed to this game that had not been exposed to it, and it's definitely an all-timer. And so I'm glad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And the
I
player boards that as you mentioned, that is a big deal actually, especially for teaching the game because the as soon as you get over the symbology, the player boards are designed in such a way that you have everything you need there. Like you never, and not that you would forget anything in Raw, like after playing it a few times, but even the player board keeps everything fresh, and you can organize it. You can organize your monuments in a nice way on the left side. You have the half of the board that is temporary, and the half that is permanent VP. Everything's organized so nicely, and the onboarding of the game is improved by its existence, certainly.
also
Yeah,
think
definitely.
the Raw's in a fairly unique position where like there's not too it's not too bad at most of the player counts that it supports. Like anywhere from 3 to 5 is like great. Like I think you have a good time. Um
Yeah, I
like
would
there
agree.
are definitely some games where like we've talked about where it's like, oh yeah, you need a certain amount of people or like too many is too many. But this one like I have a good time no matter like what player count we're at with Raw. And it goes quick enough too that like there's only like so many actions you need to take anyway. It's pretty simple. It's like, are you gonna bid on this or are you gonna just like add to the auction? So
Right. Yeah, I think that maybe most games we talk about are probably too complicated to really give a in-depth overview. I feel like this game is almost too simple not to. I feel we might run out of things to say otherwise. And I think it might be a good exercise to kind of go through the turn structure and as things that we like or things that bring out, some sort of intrigue in the game come up, maybe we can talk about them. Because really it is like a pure auction bidding game. This is, I mean, there's not much else to it, right? You're just doing an auction and understanding how that auction works is really the whole thing. Um, so if I may, right,
Yeah, go for
yeah,
it.
go for it.
basically, you start out with your little player board, and as Ben and Will have mentioned, you've got these two sides of your player board. You got permanent side and then temporary side. And what you're trying to do is collect tiles that are going to score you points throughout the three rounds of the game. The permanent tiles are going to stick through the different rounds. The temporary tiles are just scoring during that one round. And I believe there's six total types of tiles. And that's what you're bidding on. And the way that you're going to bid on them is with one of your three number tiles. Everybody starts with three. You get a little distribution. So you're going to have, maybe one really low one high one, and one mid one, or maybe you're going to have three mid ones or whatever it may be. In the three-player game that we do, usually, I think that it's like the highest tile is a 13. And the way the auction works is that you basically have one chance to bid. And so if someone throws out the 13, well, that's the highest tile, they've won the bid. You're not able to put out multiple tiles, it's a single tile. And again, it's not like, oh, I put out the two and then someone else came out with the three. So it's going to come back to me. I'm going to put out the four. No, it's one chance and one chance only. You got to have a good idea of what you think this is worth to you and what it's worth to other people. Um, and of course, it's important how these auctions get started. But I do want to talk on that for a minute. Because to me, that's one thing that I really, really like about this game. And I think that we all do is trying to get in each other's heads of like, well, how much do I think this auction is worth to Will? It's like maybe this auction is worth nothing to me, but Will's probably willing to pay his 10 tile. And if I don't put out my nine, then he's going to get it for his eight tile. And I don't want him to do that. So maybe I'll put out the nine, even though I don't even want the damn thing, you know? I think
Yeah,
that there's a lot of fun moments in the game from that little interaction.
There's also a lot of strategy with just like sometimes you can end up with a set of all low numbers or if you can end up with just having the lowest number on the board. And there's a way to force an auction and I like doing that. I like that mechanic because it's like it encourages you to do that. To like because you don't care if the auction kind of sucks. Like if everybody else has like higher numbers and you have the one, you're happy to get like anything for the one, even just like maybe a bigger number. So I enjoyed that part of the game as well.
Yeah. And
well,
that's an important point that you're not just bidding on the tiles, you're also bidding on whatever the previous number is that won an auction. So, for example, if on the first auction, the first auction in the game, I believe it's always the one tile that's out there, and so it sort of encourages a bigger auction to happen. So maybe you have this big auction before anybody invokes Raw, and nobody's drawing a red tile, which is going to basically force an auction. And so maybe someone bids a 12 for this. Well, now the board could be fully cleared and there's a 12 out there. There's a world where you might want to just take the 12 and a river, which is a relatively low value tile, for the two or the three or maybe even the four, because the 12 might be that good for the next age, essentially, the next round of the game. Um, yeah, so that's always really interesting. This one is like, oh man, do I really want to put my big number in the middle for this joker to be able to bid on, that sort of thing.
there's also a lot of subtlety to forcing people to do things, not just through literally forcing an auction by invoking Raw, when you're happy with either result, like either somebody is forced to take an auction that's smaller than they might have than they would have otherwise wanted, or they give it to you for nothing because when you invoke, you're the final bidder, and so you have all the information available to you, and you can act on that. But also in putting out numbers when you're earlier in the auction order, in order to force people that like if I know that the person next to me values this auction more highly than me, and I know that they will bid on it almost no matter what, I can force them to use a higher number by using a higher number almost perfectly confident in the knowledge that they will use that higher number on the auction. And that way, I spent nothing. I didn't want the auction anyway, but now I've forced them to use a valuable resource and put that number that's higher in the middle that, is now something I might be able to get at later. And so
Yeah.
it's insane how much depth there is in this game, considering you only have two things you can do. You either force an auction or you pull a tile out of the bag. Like that's all you ever do in this game. But there's an immense amount of thought and interaction and interplay going on between the players with these actions. And when the auction actually occurs as well, it's really this is like a I mean this game really is I think like a monumental achievement. It's like I don't think any other game I've ever played has as much depth with such simplicity. And
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean it's amazing.
Right.
Yeah, it's a
Eh,
poster child for the low complexity, high depth kind of game that like is,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I don't think you get that without like having these unique tile types that kind of synergize with themselves, but are also relatively balanced, right? So, for example, um, you might be able to force one of the other players to bid much higher than you're willing to, because they need a flood in order to score their rivers, and a flood has just come out, and they're not going to see another one. Or maybe a monument has come out, and the way that the monument score can either be by collecting a particular monument three or more times, or by collecting a large variety of these monuments. I believe you have to get what, seven of them or something like
There's
that to get
8 in
The
bonus.
the se
total.
the seventh and eighth one are bonus. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
go
Yeah,
wide or tall essentially, or both on
yeah.
monuments.
And so you might know that someone needs a particular monument, and so you can really start to strategize, especially as the game progresses, and you have a better sense for what types of tiles people need. And that's to me one of the beautiful things about the permanent tiles is that if these were always being cleared, well, I don't think you would have the game developed to the same point where, oh, I know Will wants to take, we call them the hats. I think the game actually calls them
They're
like
they're
the
fair. I think they're
emperor.
pharaoh tiles, aren't they?
Yeah, the pharaoh tiles. We call them the hats, the big hat collectors.
Yeah.
They know what's up. And so you might see someone who's like, "Oh, there's a tight race for hats and I'm not in it." And so I can force these guys to pay more for hats because this permanent tile is stuck around through the first two turns of the game. So yeah, I don't think you get that cool level of depth without this game really having a great balance to the tiles. You can really win going down any particular strategy and specializing in a particular tile type, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you're playing the tiles that come out. Like the optimal strategy is one that's taking advantage and manipulating your fellow players and finding the line through the tiles that are available. There's
Yeah.
no like one thing that always works. You have to sort of react, be strategic and tactical
Yeah.
simultaneously.
And
And
they're
get
they're kind of
lucky,
like emergent strategies that happen.
Yeah.
You might bid on something round one and happen to get, a monument that you didn't even really care about in the auction. You were trying to get a culture tile so that you don't lose points that round. And then all of a sudden that monument tile might you might get another one and another one. And all of a sudden, okay, well, this is part of my larger strategy is like I really need to focus in on those monuments.
Mhm.
Um, sorry to have cut you off there, Ben.
No, I mean, like, and there's also like luck of the draw a little bit too. I remember we had a game where I had built up like 10 rivers and I had like the highest number. So if a flood came out, it was like, I'm good. I just
Hmm.
need one flood to come out, and we hadn't had many come out all game. And then like we just drew red tile, red tile, red tile, and then like game was over before I could like score any of them.
Yeah.
Um, but like I do think. I do think there's most of it is skill based. Mostly you can find the path through.
Yes.
Um I'm typically pretty bad at this game, to be honest. I think I'm not winning most of the time. And I think it's again because I get a little too sentimental. I sometimes get tunnel vision on like, well, I'm gonna go down this strategy and I'm not really like playing the tiles that are coming out, or I'm like screwing myself for future rounds where it's like, oh, I've ended up with the 1, 3, and 6. And
Hmm.
those are the numbers I have for bidding next round, you know?
Right. Like you can almost outbid no one, right?
Th-
Like
This
that
is
Yeah.
sort of
this
thing.
is one of those games where it kind of is emblematic of the phrase, I think it's a Napoleon quote, never interrupt your enemies when they're making a mistake. This
Yes.
game is like that so often where like you'll see somebody overbidding on something and it's like, okay, it's
Yeah.
just yeah,
Rock it out, you know. You
you
get
know,
that flood tile while you have two rivers, you know. You
yeah,
score that thing. Who needs culture?
yeah.
Um
I'm
it
a big proponent in this game of kind of sitting back in the early stages of the round, and that can sometimes bite you if, as Ben mentioned, like a bunch of red tiles come out and you're put in a position where you have to be taking these small auctions. But I like to see where people are going and what direction they're going, and regarding tiles, and also for them to gas themselves out a little bit. Once people are down to one bidding tile in this game, you feel like the crunch. Like it's like, oh man, like I have to.
yes.
I've only got one tile. I have to spend it on something good. Once that happens, and if you have not spent tiles, or if you have two tiles remaining, you're going to find it really easy to sort of sneak through with some auctions that may have been harder to get earlier in the round. But yeah, there's there's so many ways to play this game for sure.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and then it's funny too because the game is an auction game, but it turns into a push your luck game if everybody gasses themselves out. Because
Yes.
there are a number of the way that the round ends is there's a number of these forced auctions that can come out. There are these red tiles in the bag, and there's always enough to, end all three rounds. And like I think even then some. Um, and as soon as you like fill up this track, and like whatever was being auctioned on, whatever was being bid on, if the last red tile comes out and fills that track, it just gets wiped and nobody gets to bid on it. So you can get to the point where only one person is like bidding. Everybody else is gassed out. Everybody else has used their numbers. And that one person just gets to freely draw from the bag as many times as they want to like fill up the auction and then get it for whatever number they want. But at that point, it could be that you're only two red tiles away from the game being like the auction just being wiped and you get nothing.
Yes.
Which I really like that as a mechanic because it does encourage you to stick around a little bit longer. Um, and also there's I think a legitimate strategy to like, well, we don't know how quickly these red tiles are going to come out. I should just get stuff while I can, because
Right.
if you don't like if you have two tiles by the end of it, two of your three, and you get to the push your luck part and you just draw like a bunch of crap or stuff that you don't want, or if you draw a bunch of reds right away, you just end up with nothing. You just like saved those two tiles and you didn't get anything for like waiting that long. Whereas the other
Yes.
person, people might have got value.
And I think that Ben, you're particularly good at like getting out with the value when you can. And my ass always wants to do the push the luck. And I've lost many a game by doing it, and I've won many a game by doing it.
Ben and I
But
will
to
be
me,
screaming,
that's
it's like,
really,
take
really
the
exciting.
auction, Blake, take the auction, it's good enough. And then Blake just reaches
Yeah.
into that bag one more time.
And I think important to mention at this point, so even if you have all three of your numbers left and you're going to need to pull an additional four red tiles in order to move to the next stage. And everybody else has used their numbers. They've already got out. There's still a risk to drawing, which is that there are these sort of, I don't want to call them red tiles as well, because when we're talking about the red tiles, we're really
They're
talking
like the
about the forced
disaster
auction,
tiles or whatever.
the disaster tiles. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
something to that
Mhm.
effect. And what they do is they'll have the same symbol as these regular tiles that you're drawing, be it like, flood river, monument, culture, pharaoh, gold, or god tile. There might not be one for god tiles or gold now that I'm thinking of it, but these others. And if that comes out and you end up winning that sort of negative tile in the auction, it's going to remove two tiles of that type from your board, which can be absolutely devastating. Be it remove no matter what it's removing, right? And
Yeah, they're
even if you
little,
get
If
those tiles are little
yeah.
poison pills that you have to
yes,
swallow with the auction. And sometimes you can end up with a full auction that is like, okay, you're going to lose two monuments, you're going to lose two
right.
culture. And there's like a monument, like a couple of hats. Like it just ends up being this complete, like it's a full auction. Like everything's filled out and it's just all complete garbage that nobody wants. And
Yeah,
then it
it
just
might be
gets
like
wiped.
negative value the auction. And if you are forced into doing an auction, you're allowed to say, no, I don't even want to take it. And if that's the case, the board will be wiped and you'll restart from ground zero. Um, and so then you're just having more and more time that you might be pulling these red tiles and having the potential to end up with nothing for your tokens. And so finding that balance, I think, is something that is really important in this game, of like how much should I be drawing? When should I be bidding? That sort of thing.
Well,
But
and I think
very
Will
rewarding.
usually ends up ahead in our games because, like, me and you are on either ends of the extreme, and he usually plays through the middle ground.
I
You
would say
know,
so.
like
Yeah.
I'm always like I'm getting in like way too early and taking like too small of like auctions for like my money's worth, and then you're waiting till the like very end and pushing your luck way too
Right.
hard,
I
and
have
then
too much
Will's
fun
getting
with it.
the
But I do think we've all become much better at the game, and we've normalized our play a little bit, but I would say that we do still have that tendency, yeah. Sometimes it
yeah.
pays off though.
Yeah, Will is Lisan al-Gaib. He's finding the middle path, the narrow
Yeah.
path.
Whoa.
This is one of the games I think I have the highest win rate in. It's definitely higher than my Forbidden Stars win rate. But again, I think it's just about playing the table, right? It's not just about playing the table, playing the tiles. I don't think it's like one of those things where I go in with like an idea of what I'm gonna do.
Right.
You have to be quite reactive, interactive, and push people into making bad decisions, gaslight them,
Yeah,
gatekeep the floods.
it's kind of addictive in a way, in like a similar way to like gambling, like there's like a lot of that going on, but like in a positive way where it's this self-contained thing where you actually are spending no money and like it's just like social credit that you're getting, which
Hmm.
is, a little bit of the opposite of the other thing we're going to be talking about later.
Yeah, I was gonna say how topical.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. One more reason these games are on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yep.
Ra's the gift that keeps on giving, you know. Can't say the same. But yeah, I'd just like to mention that this game, it's really, really hard to find any particular area of it where it's not like it doesn't just feel like tight. Like this game was obviously really well tested. Um, it had a lot of love in it and all of that stuff. Even the deal with the taking the numbers along with the tiles that you're bidding on, right? You could see a world where this game got to print and didn't have the rule that those numbers still matter on the last round, and they do. They look at who has the uh you add all your numbers together, who has the highest, who has the lowest, and there's points or negative points if you have the lowest associated with that. It really feels like they've thought about, everything with this. And this is one that we're playing a ton. It's just, you can get this done in an hour or less. Usually I would say less. And it's great. It has you thinking everything.
Like I do want to mention, are you sure that the number tiles themselves are not a mechanic too far?
Mm.
It might be one mechanic too far.
There is one thing that is a mechanic too far in this, specifically with the 25th century version of the game. And what they've done, there's a track that shows what you're meant to do, what the original game did. As the red tiles that force auctions come out, you would put them down on the track, and it would be like, once this track is filled up, we're done. And in this version game, they have that same track, and below it is where the actual like tiles to be auctioned are placed as you draw them and everything. And they've made this board double-sided. And the reason for that is that on one side, you're placing down the red tiles as they come out. And on the other side, instead of placing down the red tiles, you can discard the red tiles and the advance this little boat with Horace or whoever down the river Styx or some shit. And he just moves along the little fucking thing instead of you placing down the red tiles. And I believe that if we played this game more at our place and we had our house rules where we don't play with that side of the game board, that Will's win rate would be way lower because that always throws me off. I never know what's going on. It's bullshit.
Well, first of all, I don't think Styx is the right regional mythology for the River of the Dead, but the it is true though that I am using that as an extremely advanced mind game to push you guys off balance. The presence of the boat is
Right.
important for my
And
ability.
I'm sure most people get it. I'm totally joking. It doesn't matter at all. This has become like a little meme among us. But the reason it became a meme is to me, it's very silly that this was included at all. Like, there's nothing wrong with placing down the red tiles to track it. Like, it's not like a big extra component. And there's certainly other games that are way more overproduced, but it's like, I just don't quite get it. Seemed
Yeah,
totally unnecessary.
we probably could have saved the whole dang tree by not having them there. It's a good chunk of wood that's used there.
Yeah, especially across like multiple boxes of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any strong feelings about the boat one way or another outside of just joking about it. I think,
Yeah.
I mean, all things considered, and with the way minis are and everything, if the deluxification looks like this, where it's big, nice wood stuff and wooden tiles, this is kind of how I feel like board gaming should be.
Yeah.
This feels like,
Yes.
a proper board game production.
I'd agree.
Yeah. They've got the little metal victory point trackers, which are kept secret. And like I was thinking as like in my designer brain, I was like, why are these secret? Like, why can't they be public information? Like, why can't you have public victory points? Because surely if you were like paying enough attention, you'd be able to figure out what other people's score is. Um, and it's because it would ruin the game. It would absolutely make the last round slog where everybody is trying to count exactly how many points everybody else has and the relative value of the auctions. It needs to be just a little bit fuzzy. Otherwise, like you just get into this like slog where it's like, oh, that person's ahead. We need to like make sure that they don't get this auction because it's going to make them win.
Right.
Like this game would suck if it had that level of like king making in it or something. Like it's just a fun.
I don't think I'd go so far as to say that the game would be ruined or would suck if victory points were public. But them being secret does grease the wheels of the game experience, and that's the purpose of it. Is just to make people play confidently and be like,
Yeah.
well, what's good for me right now? And that kind of self-interest is what drives the game.
To be okay, here's my point. It would not ruin the game for us if victory points were public, but I there are some tables that it would absolutely ruin the game. There are definitely some people who would not be able to handle the power that comes from that knowledge.
Well, I think
Like I could definitely see like it devolving into something really annoying.
Yeah, there are some people that will overanalyze specific auctions in this game, and I just don't think that's the way you play this game. You're really playing the table. You're not playing like an individual auction, and I think you're kind of like missing the point. But some people, especially like their first or second play, will be like, "Oh, well, like this is like 10 points. Is it worth using the 11 here?" And it's like, don't you really should not be analyzing the auctions in this game in that manner. It's really about like what can you get for the least amount while also denying other people things or forcing them to use their resources. Like the equation is not like how do I optimize my point generation? It's like how do I kind of weave my way through the table of auctions here to get enough in this round while also preventing other people from efficiently doing so. And
Right.
that's actually more complicated than just analyzing for yourself. But
Yeah.
and ironically,
It's complicated enough that you kind of have to develop an intuition for it with this
that's what I
game.
mean though, is I think the secret VP is just greasing it because it's like you're not thinking about like, oh, like I need 13 VP this round. You're just thinking like, well, if Blake gets this, this will be an insane VP boost. I have to throw something into the wheels here. And it doesn't go deeper than that. It's just kind of like this is obviously a lot of VP on the line. I can try to stop it or at least make it harder, and that's it. It's just kind of like there's no math that'll happen. There's no primal problem that occurs in this game as a result of the VP being secret.
Yeah.
Gotta
Well,
play
should
with
we
your gut.
do scores?
Sure.
Let's do it.
All right. Who wants to go first? I don't mind going first though. If
Yeah, go
you,
on.
yeah,
I've
this is a
got
t
mine locked in my brain.
yeah, this is a 10. Easy. Yeah, I mean this is a perfect game. I don't think that there's like any situation where this would not be in my collection, any version of the game. And it to the extent that I'd be willing to like purchase the non-deluxe versions of the games for friends or like family to like so that if I went over to their house, like I could play it with them, at like family gatherings or whatever. The design is incredibly deep while being rules light. There's a lot of exciting elements of obviously auctions and a little bit of push your luck. And I think this is one of those ones that it's like a flower, it just op that opens up one more petal each time you play it. And there's a huge amount to explore within a space that superficially does not seem that complicated.
That was beautiful what you said about the flower and all.
Thank you.
Would you like to go, Ben, or shall I?
Sure, I'll go. I'm I'm going for a 9 on this one. I recognize that it's the probably the best auction game that I've played, and I've played very few. Um, I I love this game, and I'll always play it when it gets out. But it's and like I think it's all very it's like technically very well done. It's just not like I think it transcends its genre enough to make me really enjoy it. Like I think if you're gonna play an auction game, play this one. But I don't know if I'm like auction games are particularly like my bag exactly. Like I'm not like in love with the genre exactly, but like I mean it's a really fucking good game. So, it doesn't really matter if it's not exactly a genre that like I vibe with.
Hmm.
It's it's good. I like it.
Yeah. Both respectable ratings and me personally, I'm right in the middle there. I'm on a 9.5 on this one. I gotta say, a big part of that is that this game is quick and it still is very fulfilling, you know? Like this game, the reason I won't go as far as to give it a 10, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the 10. I totally respect the rating. But for me, this game's not like the main course, you know? Like this is a game I want to play before something or after something. Um, and it works great for that. Like I don't know if I would call it a filler game because that's sort of got its own
The palate
connotation.
cleanser.
Yeah. Um, but I mean, in and out in an hour has that strategic depth that, even much more complex games might not have and that you might not find in those games. Um, and it's you can pick up a copy relatively cheap and you're going to be able to play this game forever. I mean, it's great in that regard. So no issues from me. I'll definitely add that the most recent Kickstarter that happened, you don't really need the expansion, I don't think. Game's good on its own.
Yeah, you don't need that stuff.
Yep.
Well, I'm glad we can all agree that Raw is 9 plus.
Yeah, that was great, those things we just said. But now there's other great things we got to talk about.
That is very true.
Yeah, great in some senses of the word.
Well,
You know.
next on the docket is MTG, Magic the Gathering. It's kind of funny because this game is so big. It's bigger than the entire hobby of hobby board gaming, essentially.
Right.
It's funny that it even has like a BGG page. It's kind of like if I'll just show you. I don't know what I was gonna say even.
Well, it'd
it's
be
just
kind of
weird.
like if, I don't know, like American football had a board game geek like thing. It's so its own thing, you
Or
know,
like
Hmm.
it's
like
like it's like chess having its own thing, although Magic is not like chess, but it's almost like its own hobby entirely. So it's just funny that it has like a page. Makes sense, but yeah, but it's
yeah,
because
it's like
yeah.
there's surprisingly less overlap between people who play board games and people who play MTG than you would think. You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Like
Well, certainly, I think people that are in the board game hobby will be exposed or will have played Magic. But very few people that play Magic as a percentage will be in the actual board game hobby space. Um, a tiny fraction, really.
Can we
Eh,
get the praise for the Magic community out of the way? Because I just got to say, thank you, Magic players, for keeping the game stores, open and giving them your money with your pack gambling and the like. That's really good of you, really. Um, I appreciate it. I think it's great that you guys are spending your money to keep these game stores open so that we can go and buy board games from them because they wouldn't be open if they were just selling board games.
that
yeah,
is
they must be
interesting.
selling cards. Yeah, it is an integral part of the community, much like Warhammer is, you know, like
Yeah,
there's the plastic and then there's the paper, and the MTG is the entire paper economy of the most board game
right.
stores.
And we say
Well,
thank you, Good, good. You're great.
there is more than just Magic these days. There's One Piece and Yu-Gi-Oh! And the new Star Wars game,
Pokemon is huge
Lorcana,
as well. Yeah.
Pokemon. Yeah. So I think like most LGSs will be a little diversified in that space, but
Yeah.
certainly Magic in America is still the biggest.
Right.
Not the
It's
case in every
the
country,
great
but
old one of the
yeah.
hobby, you know?
It's
Mm,
I remember it being lower in Japan. It's like six or even further down the list, but very competitive TCG space over there. But
yeah.
anyway, regarding Magic itself, though, I think I want to evaluate this in two ways. One is like I want to evaluate it like as a board game, and then I want to evaluate it as like a hobby, because I think it's kind of impossible to talk about one without bringing up the other.
Right.
Blake is of course right. Obviously, we have the MTG players to thank for sort of indirectly allowing our hobby to exist. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. I think we should get that out of the way because I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. I am thankful for these people. They get to spend their money on it. It's great.
But I think as a board game, it's okay.
Good.
I don't
I
think
enjoy
it's
it. It's got like a cool system, you know? I like the different colors and all the like way that you can combine them, and they all kind of have like these archetypes. It's cool.
I think that Garfield, obviously a highly esteemed designer for a good reason. He's designed many games, and his specialty is the two-player dueling card game. Um, and he's designed, I think most of his most popular games, with the exception of King of Tokyo, probably are two-player dueling games. I guess Robo Rally isn't either, but that's kind of a wacky one. This is also I don't know if it's his first one, but it was certainly one of the earlier ones. It's earlier than Netrunner, I want to say, right? Certainly earlier than the FFG release of Netrunner.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely than the FFG. I don't know if it's earlier. Yeah, yeah, no. He made Netrunner after
it
MTG
was
for sure.
afterwards, yeah.
Yeah.
I do think he learned from Magic when he made Netrunner, because Netrunner is, I think, holistically a better design as a board game. Because I think if you're looking at things like as a board game, MTG kind of doesn't really work. You can't buy like if you buy like a box of MTG, like what are we doing here? Are we gonna like the only thing you
You
can do
mean
with a
like a box of booster packs or
yeah, like
draft packs
you
or
can
however they call them now?
yeah, I mean, but you can basically draft. That's what you can do. And drafting is one of those things where like you're paying the price of a booster box to draft like with enough people twice.
Right.
You can
And the
buy
price of a booster box is no small thing either. I mean, you're probably
no, no.
paying $100+.
Yes. And yeah, you can sell the cards afterwards, which is what I typically try to do whenever I draft this game. But you could be buying 3 boxes of Inish for the price of a booster box of MTG and just be able to draft 100 times and not have to pay for drafting every time. So like it is one of those weird things where like there are a lot of people, there is a significant limited community draft and sealed for MTG, and I've drafted MTG a good amount of times, and
Yep.
Blake has drafted MTG a good amount of times, and it's fun. It's fun to draft this game, and I think that most of the downsides of this game are not the draft experience, and unfortunately, they've made the draft experience worse in the last few years, and most of it is the result of them trying to pander to commander players and to collectors. And if you watch these early interviews with Garfield and even more recent ones, he said the struggle when designing a TCG, like when they were in the dev phase for this game, was always that there was this push from higher up to make the game more about selling to whales, to collectors, make
Hmm.
these rare cards powerful and, make them hard to get so that people buy more product. And Garfield always wanted this game to be like, hey, like make cool decks that are unique from like what you can open.
Right.
He didn't want the game to be like this sweaty competitive thing where like, oh, you have to have four of this mythic and four of this other mythic and four of all these dual lands. I don't think he genuinely did not intend this, and I think he even said he prefers limited or cube when playing this game, and I think that is genuinely how this game is like in its best form.
Yeah.
you know and part of that is also that a lot of the cards that are used in competitive play or in commander have a wall of text on them, and draft is designed to be relatively parsable at the table. Like when you're handed a certain number of cards, you can evaluate them on the spot, be like, okay, this has synergy for what I'm trying to do here, and take it and pass. And in in a lot of the cards that they're printing for like other formats are so incredibly complicated or rely on pre our knowledge of other synergies that exist in that particular format, or some obscure strategy, and it's not going to be obvious how to evaluate the card. And the fact they're trying to print cards in the same product for the draft players, the standard players, the modern players, sometimes the pioneer players, the legacy players, the commander players, like the product has to have something for everyone. Something has got to give there. And what happens is like all of those things suffer as a result. Like it's just there's no way you can have one thing that does all those things that makes every single one of those groups happy.
Right.
And frankly, the limited players are probably the ones who suffered the most.
I will say though, I think that they've done a relatively good job of trying to walk that line because it's sort of an impossible problem. Um, imagine you're not catering to all these different people. Well, you still have the same cost to print the damn cards, and there's still an expectation of like, well, if we can sell these cards to the commander players for such and such price, why would we even bother printing everything for the limited players? And so there's financial incentive to try to cater to everybody. And, imagine you did have draft and there weren't these cool cards that you could resell to the commander players. Well, suddenly the value of drafting that $100 plus that you're spending on the box, you're going to recoup less of it. And so I kind of get it. And ultimately, to me, I think drafting or playing sealed or even doing a cube is the best way to play this game. And I think it's awesome that they've kind of taken this classic, and maybe even partially invented by Magic, but whenever you're going to open a booster pack for any of these TCGs, you're going to get a bunch of crap that you don't care about. And then you're going back to the last card or whatever and seeing, well, what rare did I get? It doesn't matter if it's Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh or what have you. And the fact that MTG is always balancing these sets to at least like be able to be drafted, where you can go and all you really got to bring is the lands, and you can put together a deck that's going to have these synergies and be playable. And you're going to use these common cards that you might even throw them away afterwards because they're worth nothing, but you get like some use out of them in that particular moment. And I do think that's cool. I think that the actual draft experience is very unique. I don't know of anywhere else that you get quite that experience. I know, Will, you've mentioned a number of times that, okay, well, if you want that draft experience, go do Inish. But even though I love Inish and I love the draft in Inish, for me, it's still quite a different thing, and a big part of it
It
is like,
is. I mean, there's no deck construction in Inish because
yeah,
there's two parts of an MTG draft, which is there's a draft and then there's deck construction. I just bring
right,
up Inish because it's like if you just want to draft, then there's this option of
yeah.
an
There's
excellent board
something
game.
there,
There,
right?
there, and there are other board games that have drafts and things. It's more rare for a board game to be able to simulate the draft and deck construction in
Hmm.
a single board game box
Right.
because
And maybe even impossible to do that with a like set of cards that's going to be when the box gets open and everybody's drafting it, I don't know what the hell cards are going to be in the next person's pack. And of course, as soon as I'm saying that, I can imagine a scenario where maybe you have 1,000 cards and you pick out 200 of them and you draft those, and okay, fine, it's going to be similar.
yeah,
But
I mean, um I don't think it's impossible. And Millennium Blades tried to do this
yeah,
kind of thing. And Millennium Blades actually has a really cool simulation of this experience, but it Millennium Blades, like the actual game you play once you have the deck, is kind of like nothing.
yeah. The
It's
the deck building part of that game is really fun. The coolest part about Millennium Blades for me, for those not in the know, every card, the back of the card looks like a little booster pack, and it'll say like one card pack on the back of every card. So it's kind of, I love the theming on that of like making you feel like you're
Yeah,
opening a
it's
pack.
cool and it has like a simulated secondary market and like you can get rid of stuff you don't want and other people can buy it. And so it
Yeah,
kind of creates the sort of fun of going to like a pre-release and like trading with everybody there. But the problem is that the game itself, like the game once you have those cards is kind of like just a formality. Whereas in Magic, at least you do get to play the game. But I think moving on to the game itself of Magic, I think there are a number of positive things and there are a number of negative things. We've just talked about kind of the formats of the game and sort of the ways to play it. But regarding the game itself, I think that the number one positive thing of the game is that there are a lot of points of interaction between players. And one thing that's happened in the modern era of digital TCGs, especially, is in the effort to make games more playable when you're like on the train commuting to work on your phone is reducing the amount of times you need to even touch the screen or like reducing the things you need to think about when it's not your turn. Magic is kind of the opposite, certainly in a more control deck, especially where it's kind of like both of your turns
yeah,
on anybody's turn. And there's all these instant speed things that can be done in the game. And of course, even the phrase instant speed is a magic thing, but now I kind of use it to refer to things that are not in magic but are similar mechanically. Um, and that's really good. And a surprising number of other games in this exact genre do not have that. And whenever I play a similar game to Magic or like a two-player dueling game, I'm looking for that. And I want to think like, is there an ability for us to interact? Or is it not just like you take your turn, I take my turn, and I don't even need to be in the room when you're taking your turn because like what am I doing here? So that's nice. That's kind of the core part of the design that holds interest for me and makes the game really have any legs at all. I think. I think if it were the case that there were no instant speed things in the game, perhaps the game wouldn't have lasted this long. I mean, maybe for some people it still would have been interesting enough, but I don't think I would have any interest in it if it didn't have that.
yeah. And I feel like it's been very influential in that regard. I mean, I'm not totally familiar with the history of dueling card games like this, but it's really easy to assume with Magic that if there's something out there that's popular or other games are doing, it might have come from Magic. It probably did, and I mean, it's that ubiquitous a game. And I'd agree, like if you're going into Magic, you better expect a lot of interaction. And if you like that, then you're going to have fun. And I certainly do with this game. Um, I'm not against having, completely separate turns where we're not interacting with each other. I mean, I've probably got like 1,500 hours on Hearthstone talking about digital card games from back
Yeah.
in high school and the like. I was big on that game. Um, and I think that if you're not going to have interaction on each other's turns, you just want to make sure that the turns are relatively quick. And Magic actually I think does a pretty good job of remaining relatively quick. I mean, you can certainly sit down across from another player who is taking much too long. Um, that'll happen from time to time, but I would say most games are pretty quick for what they are and have you thinking, and um, nothing wrong with that, you know.
Yeah. I think and then the other positive thing I was going to bring up is that I do think that there's a lot of flexibility in the deck building in the sort of the limited context and like drafting and stuff. Like I think there's just a lot of really interesting skill expression that can occur from deck building in this game. Um, and I s- and I want to make sure that I emphasize this is in the limited formats
Hmm.
because I don't think there's nearly as much skill expression in deck building, not in like the deck kind of piloting, but in the deck construction, it's not nearly as interesting in constructed formats. And I'm including Commander in that actually because we had a discussion about this before the podcast, and it's kind of like Commander is this format where it's like, oh, you can do whatever. You can just throw in all these cards from all different eras of the game and make a pet deck that's got all sorts of kooky cards. But, whenever I go to the LGS or play Spell Table or whatever, I play with people, 95% of the time, people's decks are just going to be like copy pasted EDH rec, all the most popular, most synergistic cards for that commander. And once in 10 games do I see a card that I do not regularly see anyway. And so it's like, yeah, in theory, this could be a format where there's a lot of interesting, wacky stuff, but more often than not, people are just playing staples and people are playing what's best for them to play with that commander. And this kind of goes back to I think the original point of this game was like making the best of what you have. That's why I think limited is so much better as like a as a game because it's sort of like, well, I don't get to pick what I'm like what's in these packs. I just have to make the best thing I can get. But when you give people the ability to go out and spend thousands of dollars to get all the most insane, to make a deck that costs as much as a car, then of course they're going to have all these insane cards and like,
Right.
show up to the LGS to pub stomp people. And it's like, um, I just don't think that that's a good aspect to a game. Like there's like even moral hazard involved because like first of all, I mean, I'd make the argument that TCGs are inherently introducing children to gambling. Like if you're going to ban loot boxes, maybe there should be an age restriction on selling booster packs to children.
Right.
Because I know some European countries are moving in the direction of banning loot boxes and stuff. And like you're introducing children to gambling, and then which is already
Like,
not a
and
good
it's
start.
really, really, really not a good argument to say it's not gambling
Oh
because it
yeah, it
is. You know,
is.
you
It
open the
is.
booster pack, you're looking for a particular card.
Yeah,
You know,
it
I mean,
is. No,
that's
I
the way
mean,
it goes.
I
I
don't
I
really.
couldn't agree more. Like, I find it really, really predatory that these things are marketed towards kids, and they are. And I think a lot of the adults who play it got into it as kids, and like this is sort of their gambling outlet. A lot of the people I think are addicted to it, and um, I've certainly wasted my money. I was a Yu-Gi-Oh player growing up, and my brother got back into Yu-Gi-Oh about 3 years ago, and I kind of joined along on the ride. And it took me 3 months to waste a lot of money. I think it was somewhere in the ballpark of $3,000 in 3 months on Yu-Gi-Oh cards, trying to like get in and be able to play competitive like tournaments in the local area and trying to get a couple of decks that would be able to do that. And I had the money to spare, but kind of besides the point, I mean that's ridiculous to have to be able to do that to be able to play the game. And Magic is certainly guilty of the same thing of if you want to get in and play these, super competitive commander decks or what have you, or maybe you're playing the standard or
Or just
God forbid one of
well, I
the
mean, but
one of the older formats.
every constructed format is going to require you to have some
Yeah,
super expensive deck most of the
right.
time, and you
And
have
it's
your
like I,
sideboard.
I think it's great that Magic allows people to play Popper. Or hey, maybe you are going to get together with some buddies. And Ben was telling us about a YouTube series he had seen where these guys got together. And I think it was Commander. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah,
Where they're
they're
playing
playing
these
Commander,
with like a price
and
limit, right?
yeah, it's like you do like a $20 deck, so you have to
Yeah,
go and look for some cards that like might not necessarily, like, you can't break the bank. You
Yeah,
can't like go and pick up like this card that would be extremely synergistic for your um your build because it costs like $10 and then
right.
that would be half the budget of your deck. So,
Yeah, and I think that sounds so cool. And I wish more people did it. And I think one of the big advantages of Magic is that it's so ubiquitous, so well known that you probably could organize something like that and have a really great time of it. But ultimately, to me, the biggest criticism for this game is the money. Um, it's just really hard to justify when there are so many other cool games that are going to give you a great experience, sit down with other people in person. That can be hard to do nowadays. And there's so many other ways to do that and still like, think about these things and strategize and have something to chat over or whatever. Um,
Yeah, I mean, three thousand
yeah.
dollars is like a huge board game collection. That's like
oh
more than
yeah,
a
that
that's
that's
more than a
probably
huge
that's
board.
probably more than what I have over here.
I was gonna say it's more than I have. I mean, we're like I'm always complaining about how expensive the Horned Rat expansion is for Chaos in the Old World. I was just complaining about it last episode. But that's like the price of like a really pimped out, well, maybe not even a pimped out, just like maybe a normal,
Yeah,
a higher power commander deck. Like that's
right.
like
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
deck, and
That might even be
it's
one
crazy.
card. I don't
on
know.
on
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
to
it
be
could be,
fair
yeah.
to Magic, I think that they've done a better job with their secondary market and like trying to keep things relatively um I wouldn't say fair, but keep things like less volatile there than Yu-Gi-Oh! Because Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just constantly banning things and upsetting the secondary market so that they can better sell things directly to consumers. They will literally go out and ban the most powerful decks as they release the new decks, just so that you have to go and buy them.
Yeah.
They're much more predatory than Magic, I would say, in
Yeah.
my
I,
opinion.
That's a bold claim.
Yeah, Magic's certainly gone downhill on that. They've started
yeah.
to have recent bans, and now we've got all these secret layers that are frankly ridiculous. But I would say that I think it's less predatory than
Yeah,
Yu-Gi-Oh.
that's fair.
Yeah, I will say you guys have given both of your kind of perspectives on the hobby and like where you're entered. I'm probably the closest to like the layman's experience to Magic. I got a little bit into Magic the Gathering Arena for a bit. I think I spent about I've spent like maybe in the neighborhood of like $200 over a couple of years. Because like they give you a good amount of free stuff on the Magic the Gathering arena. Like you get like free cards, and I think it's like generally pretty good. But the thing that did turn me off of playing more Magic the Gathering was just some of the stuff that you guys have been talking about, which is like whenever I was like playing constructed, because in the arena you kind of have to do that in order to earn some of the like coins in order to be able to play draft, which is the thing that I'm more interested in doing. You have to play like like through like the constructed format, and it just never felt like I had a deck that could compete with like anybody. I didn't feel like I had really like access to the like right cards. And it just felt really like opaque, I guess. Like where it's
Hmm.
like, oh, I didn't even like, oh, like, I thought I put something pretty cool together with my like dinosaurs that I had like access to. And then it's like, and then like I just end up running into like somebody who has like just better dinosaur deck. And it's
Right.
like, well, I like, oh wow, like why is his deck so much better? It's like, oh, well, most of these are like he's got like four copies of these mythic rares and like, it's like, oh, okay. So there's like and that's the other part that you're talking about where it's like, oh, it feels like I can't really creatively express myself. It feels like there's some nerd and like, halfway across the country who has figured out the optimal magic
Right.
deck. That like if you are not playing this deck, if you're not playing this mono red deck, like you're like suboptimal, like you
Well,
Yeah.
you will not stand a chance. And it's like, yeah, you're gonna need to spend about $40 in order to have a deck. If you want to go budget, if you want to go budget, you can maybe get like a $40 deck that will like be able to compete.
Right.
Um,
$40 is like you can buy like a video game for that. You can go buy like Elden Ring. Gotta get a couple hundred hours of enjoyment versus like one deck. It's just like when people who have been like neck deep in this hobby for a really long time, $40 to them is nothing. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, I'll just spend that whenever. But like when you compare it to like another board game, which is why I was bringing up Inish, and because Inish is just to me like the price to enjoyment ratio is so good for Inish. But
Yeah.
um, but even not just to Inish, to just like a video game or like even a more expensive board game, Twilight Imperium, like the amount of money that goes in that gets funneled into this lifestyle hobby game is absurd. Like genuinely absurd. And like the amount of other things that you could do with that would be more fun that aren't gambling, that are stable, to just sit in a box on your shelf. You can bust them out whenever is crazy. And
Yeah.
really, the only reason I still ever play Magic is just because it's easy to find games. Like
Right.
if people around here like were like, you know what, Magic sucks. We're just all gonna play like hobby board games from now on. I'm like, hey, I'm here for that. I've been waiting for this moment my whole life.
Right.
Like that. Let's do it. But the issue is that because it's ubiquitous, it's like, man, like I don't really love Board Game Arena, and I don't really love Tabletop Simulator. And there are some really good digital implementations of board games these days. Like the Dune Imperium one is really good. And even though I'm not a huge Root fan, the Root one is really good. But for most board games, like it's kind of tough to find a game. Like, am I going to go into like a tabletop simulator Discord and hit up five dudes for like a, possibly 10-hour game of Twilight Imperium on a dime? A little hard to set up randomly.
Right.
And obviously it's an extreme example, but the point is just to say that like I don't think that like the price to value, like the value to enjoyment ratio in Magic is like so low that it's almost negative. Like per dollar spent on the game, it's almost imperceptible. You know?
Yeah, it is hard for me to mentally place myself in the head of somebody who is like spending a lot of money on this. I'm by nature a pretty frugal person. And so like $200 to me was like, man, I really spent like a lot of money doing this thing. Like, why am I even spending this amount of money? And I guess like if I had much less impulse control, it's like, man, I really could blow a lot of money on this,
Yeah.
you know?
And then, the meta changes, you have to build new decks. And, I forgot to bring this up earlier, talking about sort of the game structure. I do want to say that although this is a controversial point ever since the game has come out, I do not think the land system is good. And my reason for I have two reasons the land system is not good. One is that in the way to play the game that I enjoy the most, which is limited, the propensity to be for someone to be flooded with lands to be the deciding factor for a game is extremely high. Like
Right. Flooded or starved. Yeah.
flooded or
In a
starved,
big way.
because all the best ways to fix that kind of issue are in constructed formats, which are the formats that I do not think are
Yeah.
kind of emblematic of the strengths of Magic as a game. And so with limited formats, you have the biggest strengths of Magic, which is sort of like operating with limited resources, but you also have the biggest weakness, which is the mana system. And you're kind of vulnerable to being mana screwed one way or the other drastically. And anybody who's been to a pre-release, anybody who's been to a draft, a couple times we'll have seen this happen. You just get free wins sometimes because somebody drew no lands. They mulliganed once, and they kept a hand with three lands, never drew another one, or they drew nothing but lands. It just happens. It's the game, and
Yeah.
that's not a good design, straight up. I don't think there's any way you can defend this design like in current year as being like good. I think like at the time it was probably fine, and there have been many ways that people have like compensated for it through many cards that can find lands, that can thin the deck to make fewer lands in the deck remaining, to
Right.
fetch lands, dual
Uh,
lands.
may I add, I mean, it's my understanding dual lands came out with the first set ever,
Yes,
is my understanding.
I mean, they're
I
also really
wish they would
expensive.
have kept with that though, you know? I mean, now they're so damn expensive because they've gone down in power on lands. And, if you have a dual land now or a two color land now, it's going to have some sort of downside. I know this is probably almost heretic to say, but I feel like dual lands should be the standard that we should increase if we're going to use a land system.
No, that they
We
should
should we
be.
should
They
reduce the
abs
variance of these by allowing for dual lands and even stronger. But no, it's become this whole like now they have this whole you know the power nine and these cards that will never be reprinted type of thing And I believe that dual lands fall under that category of like we're never going to reprint dual lands because we're not going to disrupt the secondary market and piss off all these consumers.
But
And it's like the game is almost kneecapped itself in these various ways. It's like, well, sure, the game's like relatively balanced and they've got it pretty well figured out. It's got like more resources that they can put towards designing each set than any other game in existence, and it's been around for, what, 30 years now or what have you. When the game came out, it was not balanced. It was shit. I mean, imagine printing some of the cards they did back then. Some of them are so fucking busted that now to get your hands on them, it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars.
yeah, the Industrial Revolution and its consequences of the Urza's block has never been recovered from. But anyway, the other point I was going to bring up is that the other thing that I hate about the land system, and this is one of these things that's hard to explain to an enfranchised MTG player, because if you like talk to an MTG player about like board game design, they don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Like they know how to play MTG and they'll be able to quote like, every Bible verse of like the MTG rulebook, and that's fine. Like, but the point is like I'm thinking about this like from a design perspective and like and also from like a from a financial perspective. The Another big issue with the lands is that this is an area where there are two more major issues. One is that this is a place where there is no real deck building creativity that can occur. You're in these two colors. This is your distribution for how many lands you should have. And like you want to have four of this type of dual land and four of this type of dual land, and blah 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 blah. You're in three colors. Okay, you want three of these, you want three of those. Like there's going to be extremely minor variance there. And you got a 60 card deck. So you're about like a third to a half somewhere in there of your deck is just like there's no deck building going into those cards. What if instead of lands, you had all this extra room to decide what to put there? Other cards you could draw, more in like
Yeah,
flexible deck building. It's just like it's just a void in the deck
right.
building part of the game. And the other and sometimes more pertinent problem is that this is a place where Wizards of the Coast takes advantage of to print value and to force people to like buy cards to keep up with like power creep. As Blake said, like they're not printing the original duels again. So whenever they print like good dual lands again, like I think most recently they had like a new one in Duskmourn, and they had the Surveil lands in Carleb Manor. Like people are like, jumping over each other to get the new good, decent dual lands that obviously are not as good as the original, but still pretty good. And you're forced to buy those. It doesn't matter what kind of deck you're running because like you're in those colors. These lands are in those colors. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter if you're in a control deck, an aggro deck, a mid-range deck, a combo deck. Like lands are just such an essential thing for the system that if you're in those colors, you need them, which is also really bad for deck building. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to have to be like, and this is another thing that's kind of nice is in the limited format, like you don't have access to good lands usually, and sometimes you're going to be in a position where you might even take like one of the rare lands in a pack if it's useful for you to splash a color or something. But you have to be taking it instead of an actual card, like a non-land card, and so you have to be valuing it quite highly. But like not having that be part of the like sort of financial decision making of your deck is a relief.
Yeah. And I think they were right to have a mana system because I mean Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't and it's total shit for it.
Oh, I mean, I'm not saying
But
like
yeah, like the
yeah,
lands as a mana system, not my favorite. I
yeah,
think I think my personal favorite is having to discard cards in order to pay for other cards. That usually works pretty well for me. And of course, you have to kind of change the draw rules and all of that in order to make that work. But an ecosystem that can support that is usually my favorite.
that's the race for the galaxy system
Hmm. Yep.
and
I
many other
I
games.
I'll just add like in terms of like sort of the predatory nature of how expensive Magic is and also that it kind of targets kids. I wish living card games were bigger, man. And
Well,
what I mean
yeah,
by that is like card games where they print a specific set of cards and every card is supposed to have some sort of use in the meta and you can go out and you can buy like maybe I have to buy three different products in order to get every single card in the set or what have you. But once I buy those three, I have every single card that I'll ever need. And that's how Netrunner is, which is in my opinion, Richard Garfield's best game. And Netrunner's great for it. And the deck building Netrunner is really, really interesting. Maybe it's solved at the top level. I don't know, but I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, instead of mana in Netrunner, you just have money, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
different ways to get money. There's no land cards.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of I don't have anything else on Magic though. What about you guys?
Yeah, can we rate this? Is it rateable?
I feel like I could rant for like hours about all the things that
Right,
I'm
right.
annoyed with this game, and maybe more importantly, its management. But yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay,
So shall we
yeah,
do the reverse order then? I'll start here.
sure.
I will give Magic the Gathering a 6.5 if we're playing limited. If not, it can have a 2. I don't care. If we're playing limited, like if we're doing a draft, a sealed, or if we're doing cube, I'll give it a 6.5. I have a good amount of fun with it. Big plus, easy to find people to play with, but otherwise I really couldn't care for the game.
Yeah. I'm gonna give this my first non-number rating. It is it is a paper crack out of 10. Which is that it is like, you know, it's a casino, it's gambling. Like gambling is fun. And there's like fun to be had with the game. But for the most part, it's like a kind of just a money pit that
Yep.
like if you're really having fun with it, it's also kind of like a fun that's draining your bank account and also maybe like like straining you mentally to like we've talked about the like expense to enjoyment ratio isn't like great. But like the highs are high and then I feel like the lows are low. Like I think it brings out like a I don't think it brings out the best in people is
No,
also part of it.
yeah, we have not talked about the Magic community itself that much, but
Other than to thank them for supporting the local game shops. Thank you, Magic community.
but yeah.
Yeah. So there it is. That's my rating, you know?
Yeah, I think I like Blick's way of rating this. I think I give this like a 6 out of 10 if I'm playing like a format that I like one of the limited formats. Give it like a 1 for like the hobby, like predatory nature of it, the moral hazard, the exploitative nature of it in general, emotionally, and in terms of like the gambling addiction, and the gaslighting the company does to its consumers regularly, uh, the sort of rapidity of releases. There's just too many releases to keep up with frequent for most people, unless this is like your only hobby. This is your lifestyle, and all that's just bad for I think even maybe the longevity of the game. Like it's overwhelming, even if you're an enfranchised player, I think. Um, However, limited is fun. I like limited, but I think, as I said, limited is not perfect. It's like a fun time, but as I mentioned, there are going to be many games, even among people who have drafted many times that are skilled players and skilled opponents, where the game is decided by somebody just drawing a bunch of lands or not drawing any. And that's a fundamental game design flaw. Like that doesn't have to be there. You can design a game that does not have that problem. Like
Yeah,
all this to say, I don't think that the game itself is as good as the financial investment would have you believe.
right.
And there is one thing that I wanted to talk about as well that I forgot to mention earlier, but there's this interesting aversion to the political aspect of board games. And I don't mean political like, actual politics, but in like the negotiation aspect of board games. So like a lot of the 60 card or like limited players don't like Commander for multiple reasons, but also because they don't want to play a game where there is a political or negotiation angle to it. And that's totally fine. You're not forced to like things you don't like. But then what's interesting is when you do play Commander with people and you interact with them, which is a fundamental part of the game, they hate it.
Hmm.
They'll be like, "Oh, you killed my one thing. I'm going to do nothing but attack you for the rest of the game." And
Like
it's
people
like,
people are kind of vengeful in Commander, huh?
yeah, it's like what do you mean? Like you were going to win the game if I didn't do that. Like this is the rational thing for me to have done. And like in a board game, like I think we were talking about this before and I mentioned it. This is like if in Komet, if somebody had gone over the victory point threshold to win the game, and then I step in and I pull them down by taking like an area from them and it brings them down back under 10 or whatever. Are they going to be like, "Oh, I can't believe you did that. Why would you do that?" It's like, "Well, of course I did that. You were about to win. Like, what am I supposed to do? Just let it happen?" Like, people, and so the irony is that you play the social format of Magic, and like, people just have no ability to understand social dynamics in board
But
games,
a
or like,
bunch of mental midgets playing Magic the
well,
Gathering
I don't know
Commander,
if
huh?
I'd use that term, but it's just surprising to me because it's like it's supposed to
Oh,
be.
right. Yeah, I probably shouldn't use that term. Sorry.
It's, it's too late. But the it's
It's
too
been
late.
said.
It's too late. It's been said. But
This episode's already explicit. You
it's
just
too yeah.
drop
It's
the.
I've rated it as mature. But it's like this is the format that's supposed to be the like the political negotiation one, and like there is more negotiating in one game of TI4 than there is going on in every single group of four people playing Commander in
Yeah.
a month in an LGS.
The Hakan have more negotiating powers in their left paw than all of the Magic community does in their whole bodies.
But it is interesting because I feel like maybe the people who want to play Commander and do their own thing and not be interacted with would be better off just playing like a heads down Euro game. You know what I mean? Like, why are they playing Magic? Is it just because they're not exposed to board games? I think that's what it is. I mean,
Maybe.
because almost everybody's exposed to Magic at one point or another. And like, maybe they're just going to be happier if they play some like heads down Euro game. They play Gaia Project, Terra Mystica, whatever. I mean,
But
those
but
games
the,
actually,
the hardest part of playing a board game is finding three other people that are going to nerd out on it with you.
that
You
is
know?
very true. Yeah, yeah.
Like it's so easy to get a game of Magic. I mean, not that you can't do this with board games. Get the Meetup app. You can show up and play board games with whoever you want. Or pretty much any time you want, rather is what I mean. But I mean
Yeah, not
Magic,
necessarily whoever you want, but you
yeah, yeah.
you,
You're
you can play
probably
them.
you're probably not gonna get whoever you want, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, much easier to find a game of Magic, I would say though. You can just wander in off the street. They'll take anybody, man. I've seen it. Last time I was playing Magic, local game store, some dude's got the damn honey mustard and chicken strips during the draft, and he's fucking told to move them, so he places them on the display
Oh
of
God,
like
yeah. I was
product being sold. You
I
remember
was
that?
I I was there for that. Yeah.
Pitiful. I mean, the
Well,
dregs of society.
it's one of those things that's weird though because the Magic community has literally nothing but disdain for the hobby board gaming community.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm dishing it right back. Fuck them.
well,
There's a lot of cool people who play Magic, but
yeah,
I'm
I
just
mean,
saying, like
hey,
when you have that much reach, you're gonna get some shitters too, and let me tell you, they stank enough to ruin it for everybody, man. I mean, you got to clear out of that outhouse. You know what I mean?
yeah, there is it's one of those things where, when something becomes extremely popular, there's just going to be a higher probability that you get more people both in real numbers and in general, that are just not going to be pleasant to hang out with for one reason or another, whether it's their body odor or just because they're not
The
social
floaters,
people.
man, they rise right to the top. I'm telling you.
But I think it's just weird though, because I think that you go to like a board game meetup and the type of people you play with are almost like an entirely different type of person than you run into at an MTG meetup. These are both allegedly board games. So like what's so different about it? It kind of makes you ask those sorts of questions. It's like what's really pulling people into this hobby? Are these all people that are gambling addicts that just like happen to also want to play a game? And because of that, they're not the same as the board game hobby people who are not gambling addicts. They just want to play a game.
Mm.
Or is it that just because it's popular, like I said, maybe you're just drawing in way more people, and as a result, you end up with people that maybe aren't as socially adept. And
Um,
Yeah.
There's a point I've heard about like media in general, which is like the medium is the message. And I think that like but the message that you get from board games is like, oh, the thing I'm about to sit down is a communal experience. I need to hang out with other people. I need to go visit them face to face.
Mm,
And like it is balanced in internally so that there is like an equality among people. You know, it's like there's a meritocracy. I feel in most board games, you're equally screwed by the chance and by the like you know, like you come in with like your ability to like your knowledge and like usually it's like the person with the best strategy or the best luck comes out ahead. But the medium of the trading card game and the message that you have there is like, well, I don't, I can't afford the right cards. And like in some of these formats, you know, it's like I
yeah.
can't,
Can't
I,
afford it? Get bent.
I also like, it's like also maybe I just didn't look up what the like best deck is, you know, like because I feel like there's a lot of that where like oh, I like to just think about the game and come up with my own strategy. That's where I have
Right.
fun. It really sucks the fun out of something when I have to look up a
Yeah.
guide and
Good
start
luck going
following other people's
undefeated at the
strategy.
pre-release without watching Louis Scott Vargas's like breakdown of what archetypes are the best like 2 weeks before the set comes out, and then studying every card, you know? Like fuck you.
Yeah, it is pretty funny. Yeah.
I'm with you though, Ben. I think that's a great point of like I think it probably does attract different people because it is different, you know? I mean, a TCG is always going to be about the money. And I'm not saying board games aren't. They need to make money. Um, and I think it's also important to mention that there are plenty of people in the hobby board game, hobby that spend way too much on it. And I've certainly been guilty of that. And it can be hard to get rid of games and thin out the collection. But I think at some point, most people come to the conclusion of like, I should try to have games that I'm going to play. And, you know, try not to buy games that I won't play, you know. Um, but, you know, it's not just Magic that has like spending issues, but I think that they certainly lean into that, and it's annoying.
I'm just going to quickly circle back because it's the thing that I have a chip on my shoulder about, like a genuine chip on my shoulder that I will freely admit, which is the disdain that the MTG community has for the board game hobby, aka us,
Right.
as a demographic, which is that I think they're keenly aware in general, maybe not every individual person, that they're the ones supporting the store and keeping it afloat. And so we're just like the peasants, coming in to buy our Reiner
Right.
Knizia auction games occasionally. And I think that it's one of those things where like there'll be people that are like, wow, like, this new mechanic sucks. It like turns it into a board game. Who would want to play a board game? And it's like Magic is a board game. What do you mean? Like we're playing a board game right now. You realize
Don't tell
like
them that. I mean,
I mean, like just because Magic is big, it's like it still falls under this umbrella. There are plenty of other games that are in this exact niche. And
right.
there's so many I mentioned at the very beginning, there's so many games in this niche that are really doing new stuff that are really kicking ass and are really, really fun to play and provide a lot of interesting variability. Not they usually not with a draft. Like, BattleCon, Exceed, React, Sakura Arms, these are all games, and actually Sakura Arms does have some deck construction. These are all games that like you get a lot of variability through, choosing different characters or like some ability to modify your deck, or and a lot of them are just tighter, better, less luck reliant designs. You know, if I'm playing somebody for money, I would rather play them in BattleCon than in Magic because like in Magic, it's like I could just get flooded.
Hmm.
And in BattleCon, it's like, well, if I lose, it's like, well, I messed up, or like, hey, they had an amazing play. There's so little luck in that game, but it still manages to be exciting and create the same highs of like an experience of a Magic game that I can't like in my like mental tier list of like two-player dueling card games. Magic is like really low down on the list. I would only put like some digital card games below it because I think like digital card games that don't have instant speed interaction inherently do not interest me really. But I think that Magic is like, if there's like S, A, B, C, D, like Magic is like in C for me. Like there's so many designs that have come out in the last decade, and of course there's Netrunner as well, which are just like I would rather play always.
Right.
You know?
If any Magic fans are out there, do yourself a favor and find a way to play some Netrunner. You can go on gintechie.net, I believe it is, and play Netrunner right now. You can learn about the game. Go watch a video on Netrunner. It's so much better. It's another Richard Garfield game. You're gonna like it.
Yeah, and
You
you
know,
Just
can
as a
get it.
starting point,
You
or
can get it
Soccer
like
Arms, any of them that Will mentioned.
yeah, you can get Netrunner printed for like all of the cards for not like that much comparatively, right?
well, this is what
Like
Blake brought up earlier. It's an LCG model, so you could like you don't have to crack packs. You're like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna buy like all of Netrunner, and like
Right.
I'll just have all the cards, and I can just deck build freely. Like I don't need to buy
What is the
singles or whatever.
fan made that is now doing all the Netrunner stuff? It's not,
Nisei, is it?
yeah,
I
Project
think. I
Nisei,
think
yeah.
it's Nisei. Yeah, they're doing a really cool job, and
That's
there's an
Nisei, Project Nisei. They're
yeah,
worth looking up.
definitely they're doing a really good job with that stuff, and it's just depressing though. I mean, talking about Magic depresses me, and not in like a boomer way of like, oh, Magic used to be so good. Like that's besides the point, even if it were true. But it's more like I just wish that Magic was to the board game hobby what like Wingspan is, or
That
like
gets people
something
into it.
that
Yeah.
people are like, wow, Magic is cool. What else is out there? What other two-player dueling card games are out there? But so often I see people that only play Magic. They'll just play
Yeah.
Magic and more than just play Magic, they'll be dismissive of everything that isn't Magic and
Mm.
like not care to even try
You
anything.
know
yeah.
what's a comparable community that I think does a much better job at like being open to like maybe I'll try a new game is the D&D community. I'm not huge on D&D, but from my experience, people who play D&D are totally open to the idea of like getting down, getting and sitting around the table and playing a different board game. And I think it's partly because they're there to be with people and to hang out and to be social. And I don't
Yeah,
know.
again, the medium is the message. When
Yeah,
you're playing Magic the Gathering, you're here to win.
yeah, you're
Okay?
here to fucking win,
You're here to stomp, okay?
bro. Fucking I would when and I think I'm pretty good at Magic. Like I've hit Mythic on MTGA, like doing drafts and stuff, which isn't like a huge accomplishment, but it's something, right? Like it just makes me laugh the whole game. Like some of it is so dumb, man. I don't know where I was going with all that.
Well, I think it comes around back to the thing that I was trying to allude to, which is that part of the disdain that comes from the MTG community towards board games is the idea that Magic is like a more skill based than hobby board games. And obviously, like, I'm not saying every hobby board game is high skill, but like, there are almost innumerable games in the hobby of board gaming that have a higher skill ceiling than
Right.
Magic.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
genuinely, like thousands. And I don't think that like there's any reasonable debate on that either. Like, if you just
I
like
think
look
there's
at it.
something of like a information plague with it as well, where like it's so easy to get out and study Magic. And I think that's sort of the same issue that causes like sort of deck construction to be so similar across the board where people are just copying decks because a lot of the game has been solved. So you can sit down and like watch the best players and see how they play and kind of circumvent that process of like discovering the strategy for yourself, which to me is one of the most fun parts of being able to open a new board game. Is that you get to figure out the strategy, and then it is very rewarding once you get to implement that as well. But with Magic, I think a lot of people kind of, almost make it like a task to be learned.
Yeah,
Um,
and like we just cracked open arcs for the first time last week. Like we'll probably get talk about it in an episode in some week in the future. But and we were like, what the hell is going on in this system? Like, but it's like
right,
even though like I have mixed feelings with the system as is, just the act of like learning a new system and trying to figure out what's going to work is so much more interesting and fun. And I think like stimulates the brain, like the creative juices more than like being told like, okay, well, you want to play this color? This is the deck.
right.
Or, you're drafting in these colors, you first pick this card. Because even though I like draft, like there are people, and I've seen people in person do this. They will bring on their like phone like an app and just look at like, okay, what's the highest win rate card in this
That's
pack?
so lame,
I've seen
bro.
people literally do this and be like, oh yeah, okay, this one, okay, sure. And then they end up with a deck at the end that's like all of the high and there's just why are you here? Like
What a bunch of losers.
what are you doing?
Sorry to say, but
Like,
losers.
well, I mean, okay, I'm not going to go that far, but I'm just
I
like
will.
wondering.
There, I'll do it for you. I'll say it
It's
twice. Losers, losers, man.
okay. I'm just saying
I'll
it's
say
just
one
like
for Ben too. They're losers.
it's just like I mean, you got to find some enjoyment in your life is all I'm saying. You know, like if that's how you find enjoyment, then like that's fine, but like I genuinely find it hard to believe that that is fun for you
Yeah,
to do that. You know, like I mean, maybe people feel pressured because of the financial element, which as we all mentioned is this massive negative blight on the game. And if that financial element weren't present, then like maybe people will be more prone to just like intuitively doing stuff and finding a nice creative outlet for deck construction. But that's not the world we live in, so it's just not the case.
Yeah,
right.
again, going as the medium is the message. Typically, the way that the Magic game goes is I've killed you, I've won. And the way that most board games are is like, we tallied up the victory points, we tabulated it, and he just eked it out, It was a
Right.
good game all around.
Usually
Everybody
there's
was
like a
pretty
discussion
close.
afterwards of like, oh, wasn't that so cool? Man, I've had Magic players that will get like offended when I try to talk about the damn game, you know? What you're really rubbing this one in, It's like, fuck you, big dog.
Well,
And
it's
usually
yeah,
big dog is a good description.
the big dog.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, before things get too crazy, I guess, or should we wrap things
Do,
up?
do yourself a favor. Next time, instead of buying the foil copy of that card, get the regular one and use the difference to buy yourself a tube of deodorant. How about that? You know what I'm saying?
Or
Or I'm sorry, Will, you said before it gets too heated. My bad.
no, it's anyway,
Soap
I'm just
isn't that expensive, is all I'm saying.
soap is not that expensive. That is
Yeah,
true.
maybe get some antiperspirant so you stop sweating so much.
Yeah,
It
shit.
is true. I guess that's a dual prong joke because there's the smell joke, but also the sweatiness of the
Hmm.
competition joke. So
Yeah.
yeah, nice
Yeah, that
one,
was
Ben.
legend.
That was pretty good.
I'm sorry, not legend. That's from my Hearthstone background. I meant that was mythic,
Oh
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, I mean, I got introduced to Magic in 1997. So I've been familiar with the game for a very
Oh
long time.
man, the year
And
of my birth.
really, oh, you were born in 97.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was playing
Been playing
games.
Magic
I was
since
playing
I've been
games back when
born.
you were being born, but and so I have a long history with the game, and on some level, it kind of hurts me to speak ill of it, but at the same time, it deserves it. And I think it deserves to be critically examined, not just for like what it's become as like a corporate, like financial money printing machine, but also just as a game. Like, has it survived as like a good game design through the years? And I think the answer is that it has been surpassed even by Garfield himself. And in a way, the biggest shame is not all these moral hazards and gambling addictions that it's produced and everything, but rather that perhaps it's overshadowing and a lot of designs that are excellent and preventing great new creative designs in this space that aren't trading card games that are LCGs or even just one box games for board games from really becoming more popular because people are just involved in this all-encompassing lifestyle magic hobby, and they don't have time or more money, to go out and try other stuff. It's just a shame, genuinely.
Yeah,
Yep.
Anyway, that's all I have to say about it.
me too.
All right, we'll see you next time. Hopefully, it'll be a more positive episode next time.